I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is remembered as one of the greatest American inventors in history. He is responsible for the light bulb and the phonograph, among his hundreds of other inventions that have changed how we see, hear, and experience modern life. However, not all of Edison's inventions were successful. In fact, some of his inventions were epic failures. Failure is a natural part of the invention process, and Thomas Edison learned this at an early age. As a young boy, he was curious about the world around him, and because his mother homeschooled him, he had plenty of opportunities to experiment. Edison set up makeshift laboratories for his experiments anywhere he could, which helped him investigate his questions about the world. But he also once burned a barn to its timbers for an experiment. He was not immune from bad ideas and failures even as a child. At one point, he decided that humans should be able to fly. He convinced a friend, Michael Oates, to consume a sizable amount of effervescent powder and leap from a tree flapping his arms. Edison quickly learned the sting of failure from his mother and turned his attention toward other interests. Many of his early attempts at invention were also failures. As a young adult, Edison became obsessed with the telegraph, which allowed people to transmit information instantly. After securing a position as a telegrapher, Edison began conducting experiments on the telegraph, often without authorization. His unapproved experiments meant he was let go from several positions. Many people would consider Edison's life a failure at this point, but Edison persevered through many failures to invent the Morse repeater in 1864. It helped reduce the number of errors in telegraph messages by slowing down the transmission and punching the dots and dashes into a piece of paper. This initial success helped launch Edison into maturity and fueled his reputation as an inventor. After his first success, though, Edison was not immune to failure and developed the mature approach of not dwelling on his mistakes. The inventor had a habit of bouncing back frequently from loss, so he tended to move on quickly to his next idea after a failed experiment or venture. Even though he had several factories and hundreds of patents, his invention process was not always successful. Here are 5 of Thomas Edison's most epic failures. Number 1. Automatic vote recorder. The first invention that Thomas Edison invented professionally was the automatic vote recorder, because he wanted to improve the government's legislative process. The system was very slow, and Edison believed he could improve the system's efficiency with a simple device, saving several hours daily for these public servants. Edison thought there must be a pressing need for his new invention, and DeWitt Roberts, a fellow telegrapher, invested $100 into this venture, an exorbitant amount of money at the time. The new device created a central recorder where members of Congress could cast their votes, and the machine then tallied decisions almost automatically, making congressional meetings much more efficient. Edison was convinced that he had found success when he presented his new invention to the Congressional Committee. However, the committee rejected him completely. They decided his creation would destroy the purposefully slow system for collecting votes. The politicians used the deliberately slow process to trade votes, negotiate, and execute political maneuvering. Edison's new invention would take away that time. They were also concerned that if people could cast their votes quickly, they would not think about their votes as critically. For them, this machine would change their way of doing government, so they turned him down. Edison's first attempt to make a name for himself as a professional inventor was a failure. This first failure was a blow for Edison, but also a valuable lesson for the young inventor. He decided he would not spend his life creating things and then trying to find a market for them, as he had done with his first invention. Instead, Edison started down the path of creating inventions that would fill an existing need, because he realized that if he could not sell his creations, he would never make the money necessary to be successful. With this mindset, he would eventually become famous for taking other people's ideas and making them marketable and accessible to the ordinary person. Number 2. Talking dolls. Talking dolls were part of Thomas Edison's ventures into the entertainment industry, and like many of his inventions, they were ahead of his time. He intended the toy to build on the phonograph's success. He invented a smaller phonograph to place inside imported German dolls. His goal was to have the dolls on the market by Christmas 1888, but significant production issues delayed that goal for over a year. The dolls finally went on sale in March 1890, but they almost immediately started coming back with complaints that the dolls were too fragile for little girls to play with. The mechanisms inside the dolls were delicate, so the slightest bump could knock them loose, warping the doll's speech or even breaking the mechanism completely. Some customers also reported that the voices grew fainter over a very short amount of time, sometimes only an hour. These issues made the toys unfit for children. Even when they did work, the recordings in the dolls were not of good quality. Edison had recorded children saying phrases intended to make the dolls more relatable, but they had so much hissing and cracking that the recordings sounded ghastly and monstrous, actually frightening the children. Instead of creating a toy that everyone wanted, Edison invented another failure. By April 1890, Edison had pulled all the dolls from the market and moved on to something else. Even though his work would go on to influence the toy industry and eventually bring us the talking toys we have today, Thomas Edison's talking dolls failed to find widespread approval or a quick profit. Number 3. Iron Ore Separator. Although you have probably heard of talking dolls and voting machines, you may not have heard of iron ore separators. But Edison was so diverse with his inventions that he dabbled in many different industries. One of those areas was mining. Thomas Edison was first drawn to the mining industry when he noticed that the eastern seaboard had a scarcity of easily usable iron ore. The mines in this area were filled with rocks that workers had to remove before the ore was available for smelting. Separating iron ore from the rocks around it can be an expensive and complicated process. But Edison believed that he could use electromagnetism to separate iron ore from the debris and unusable low-grade ores. Of course, he wasn't the only person who saw an opportunity. At the time, more than 20 small ore separators were working on the eastern seaboard mines. Edison tried to get ahead of the competition by building large factories. Edison went through numerous technical challenges, failures, and financial losses. He spent about 10 years working on his iron ore separator and invested so much money that if the phonograph had not been a success, Edison would have had nothing. Edison personally managed the factory in Ogdensburg, New Jersey, but could never get ahead of all the problems and make the plant run as he had envisioned. He had to redesign, rebuild, and repair numerous machines throughout the process, including the crushing rolls and the elevator system. It all came at a shocking price that neither Edison nor his investors could afford. By 1899, Edison finally acknowledged defeat. His foray into the mining industry had failed. Iron ore had become an obsolete material as people progressed onto other substances, and Edison was left to turn his attention to different, more profitable ideas. However, Edison did not allow this failure to crush his innovative spirit. Instead, he took sand, a primary waste product from his mining ventures, and poured it into a different production area, the cement industry. More on that in a minute. Number 4. Electric pens. Although in the current day we have copy machines, in Edison's day, making multiple copies of the same document was a time-consuming process. The way people could make copies was to handwrite each one. Writing by hand took time, but it also had various other drawbacks. Misspelling, mistakes, and illegible handwriting made copies sometimes unreliable. As companies began expanding during the 1800s, they needed to find a way to make handwriting documents quicker and more reliable. To help people with this, Edison invented the electric pen. It was designed to punch holes through wax paper with a handheld needle, creating a stencil. People could then use this stencil to make copies of documents by rolling ink over it. The stencil allowed people to make multiple copies without the drawbacks of handwritten documents by printing the documents onto paper. However, the electric pen had drawbacks of its own. A battery and a small motor powered it, but they were both fragile and required maintenance. Maintaining the battery required specific chemicals that people had to pour into the machine, which was messy. Also, there were several cosmetic issues that many people could not overlook. Edison had envisioned them being used in schools or offices, but these contraptions generally were distracting for everyone else because the pens were so noisy. They were also much heavier than standard pens, and people had difficulty adjusting to them. Edison attempted to improve both the weight and the noise level, but was never able to resolve it enough to make the pen popular. In addition, his electric pens were expensive. People were unwilling to pay $30 for a pen, which was an exorbitant price at the time. Part of the reason the pens were so expensive was that Edison hired agents to sell them. The agents would buy each pen for $20 and then sold them for $30. Overall, the electric pen was a complete failure for Edison, but it did help jumpstart other inventors. They used Edison's initial ideas to create other inventions that eventually led to the modern tattoo needle. Number 5. Cement houses. Edison's fifth epic failure is colored by his other successes in the cement industry. He had become interested in the cement industry and started his own company, the Edison Portland Cement Company. Cement was already being used for sidewalks, but Edison began to wonder if there were other uses for cement. His company built concrete cabinets, pianos, and even houses. Edison was convinced his company would help struggling families because concrete houses could be constructed with pre-built pieces, and his idea was to pour the sections beforehand and then build them quickly. He also created concrete furniture, intended as a cost-effective alternative to other options. Concrete furniture would last a lifetime, which he thought would make his cheaper furniture a competitive choice. However, Edison's new inventions did not take off. Concrete was still too expensive for this to truly be a viable option for most people. Even though the houses were fireproof, they looked horrible and were so obvious that people felt that their financial situation was evident to all their neighbors. The furniture was also not popular. Cement was more expensive than other materials, and people did not like how the furniture looked. Although his attempts to launch cement furniture and cement houses were a complete failure, his venture led him to supply the concrete for Yankee Stadium in the Bronx in 1922. Although Edison may not have made his fortune on concrete, the few concrete buildings he did construct still stand today, proving that even though his overall plan was a failure, his basic idea had some truth and success. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Thomas Edison, check out our book, Thomas Edison, A Captivating Guide to the Life of a Genius Inventor. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.